Hola amigos, bien ok, bienvenido otra vez desde Medellín. Hoy, día 65, day 65 of our process, so 25 days to go, solo 25 días más hasta el fin de este proyecto. Entonces, como dice ayer, voy a escribir o explicar un poco más con este proceso, con el final parte del proyecto, be a tour guide. Entonces, para buscar otra vez cómo nosotros podemos utilizar nuestra nueva fluidez en la lengua en un escenario muy práctico. En este caso, para pensar que alguien va a visitarnos en nuestra ciudad y necesita nuestra ayuda para hablar para ellos. Todas las cosas por una visita turística en este estilo. Okay, so here we are, day 65 of the challenge. Now in the last 25 odd days of this, we're going to try and focus on how we will use our new fluency, the new knowledge we've gained over these last month or so, 2 months or so, how we're going to use our vocabulary and the expressions we've practiced in a very practical task, in the sense of acting as the guide for our imaginary guest who's coming to visit us in our city, but is going to need our help to translate effectively for them and manage through the different situations they would normally have to do. So to begin with, we're going to test our vocabulary, because obviously we're going to have to translate a lot of things. This might be things that we hear in particular situations. We might need to translate directly for our friend, in the sense that they might ask us a question of someone, or they themselves are asked a question of that type of, where are you from? Is your first time here? Do you like it? What do you think? This kind of question. Or your friend might indeed have some other questions about perhaps the history of the town or the city you're in. When did they build this? Tell me more about that. How do they make these this particular food? What's the secret to this recipe? So you might need to effectively translate for them in situations to get information back for them. Again, we're also going to be using a lot of different expressions of time, not just in the sense of what time is it now, but also expressions of past, present and future, as we try and describe either what we were doing or what we are going to do tomorrow, or things like, we say here, the flight took 9 hours. So there's some different ways we might need to describe what's happened when we're talking to other people on behalf of our friend, to try and explain what's been going on, how they did, how was their journey, where they're going to, where they're coming from, this kind of thing. And again, we're going to have to speak not only about us, which we're perhaps more used to now, but we're going to have to speak about them. So we have to speak about our friend, and also we're going to have to then introduce perhaps back to our friend the other people that they're meeting or we're meeting. So now we have to get used to describing and talking about not just ourselves, but our friend, and also other people we meet perhaps as a group. So we now have to start translating and making sure we can correctly refer to different groups of people. So it's me, him, them, us, this kind of thing. Clearly we're going to need to use a lot more of the, or in English will be our classic W questions: who, what, when, where, why, how, and also in that case do or did. We need to be able to use a lot more of these questions and be ready to answer them across a whole range of different situations. And we can, obviously the scope of these is pretty wide. Things like the airport, taxi, metro stations, different kinds of transport issues, maybe the restaurants, museums. Perhaps you have to take the tour and translate for your friend as you go. Some of these perhaps you don't know a lot about. Maybe you're going to have to learn as you go. And equally, because your friend may well ask for different information that perhaps you hadn't thought of in situations. They may see a whole situation completely different to you and be interested in aspects of it that you yourself would perhaps have previously ignored, maybe. Okay, so that's the general outline. Esa es en general, generalmente, esa es la idea con el proyecto, para ayudarnos para reenfocar los nuevos vocabularios, las nuevas palabras y oraciones que nosotros vamos a estudiar en estos 2 meses más o menos, para utilizar en este escenario práctico para nuestro visitante, para ayudar a nuestro visitante. So we're going to use all of this kind of stuff that we've been learning and practicing over the last 2 months or so in a very practical scenario. So okay, so now you're responsible for your friend who's come to visit you. How are you going to help them navigate around your city? What kind of things are you going to need to do? So we can look at a whole range of different scenarios again, refresh that, see what kind of ways we might need to rephrase questions or be prepared for different questions we might receive either from our friend or on behalf of our friend. Now we'll give an example of this just briefly while we wrap this one up for today. Let's imagine, for instance, we're in the airport, so estamos en el aeropuerto, and our friend has a classic problem. Él perdió su maleta. So your friend's lost his suitcase. Just before we get started. Yeah. So now we need to know, what we're going to say, obviously. So I have to go back to the counter, back to see the people at the airport for him, and say, okay, look, mi amigo perdió su maleta. My friend has lost his suitcase. Easy enough, but then of course there will be some other questions following that from the people at the airport who are there to help us. And this is the kind of thing I mean. Now we're in this scenario, we have to imagine what other questions we would get on behalf of our friend to help fix this situation. How are we going to respond to these extra questions? Because, okay, I can ask them, mi amigo perdió su maleta, my friend has lost his suitcase, but then I'm probably going to get questions like, de qué color, de qué tamaño, what color, what size. So now I need to think about, okay, how would I describe this? How am I with colors? How can I describe, sizes of suitcases, this kind of thing. So this another new type of dialogue, perhaps new vocabulary I might need to look up and refresh just so I know how to cover that. Because ultimately in this particular situation, we might need to phone the airline back the next day to see if they found the suitcase. So es posible que en el próximo día necesitamos llamar al aeropuerto para preguntar por su maleta. Something like that. Yo tengo una referencia, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I have a reference, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we'd have to progress the conversation to get back the suitcase. So I hope you can see from this that the idea really is we can think very carefully about situations that might happen, and we can try and prepare as much as we can for the most likely type of questions or dialogues we would need in these different situations. And because we're not just talking about us, we're talking about our friend or possibly friends, if you want to make it really complicated, have a group visit. The potential for widening these dialogues is huge, because you can pick different locations, different types of activities, places you might like to visit. Because often, your friends want to do perhaps different things that you would do, perhaps yourself. Maybe you don't visit museums, but your friend does. So, okay, so what would I do if I'm in the museum? I don't go there. What would I have to say? Things like that will help us test really how far we've gone with our learning vocabulary and how comfortable we are with new expressions and sentences we can use to ask useful questions in different scenarios. So that's the challenge now. So in our remaining 25 days is to try and work on these a little bit, expand the dialogues we've been practicing, make sure we're happy with different vocabulary we're likely to need or to hear in particular situations, and see how much of that we can practice. And then we can practice these using, as we've done previously, we can use our kind of flashcards, our dialogues we use, maybe like I said, our fridge readings even in the morning. We can use that for some of the new stuff, take scene by scene, work our way through it, perhaps listen to some specific podcasts or maybe some videos that are talking about particular situations to help us. come across different voices, different accents, different ways of talking about particular topics or scenarios. So perhaps if we're looking at, say, like museums, for instance, maybe in your city there's already a channel about your local museum. Perhaps they run that in, you know, the different language. You can listen to that, or if not, watch perhaps a documentary on museums generally, because a lot of that vocabulary will still be useful for perhaps the museum in your town. That kind of example. Yeah. Okay, so that's it for today. I hope that's helpful. Déjame saber en los comentarios how you get on. Let me know in the comments. And now on in, I'm going to be putting up perhaps a bit more Spanish. There's a mixture to show, you know, what I'm doing to try and practice for me, and hopefully that will be a more useful format for us both for me to practice and for you to see directly the kind of translation, you know, Spanish to English. And we'll try again tomorrow. So for now, from Medellin, cheerio. See you soon.